now we are going to start our event. Okay. Hope you enjoy the event. Okay. We tried to choose the hot topics for this event. So let's go directly to the agenda. Okay. So as usual, we are going to start with the IAM trends. Okay. What is coming? Okay. So this is our first topic here. Then we are going to move to a very hot topic in Latin America, consumer identity, with all this digital transformation in all the countries in Latin America. This is a very hot topic for us. Okay. Then, as you can see here in the agenda, we move to open banking. Okay, why open banking is here? You guys see what happened with GDPR. Okay, in the last years, now it's happening the same with open banking in Latin America. We are seeing different countries in Latin America publishing their open banking regulations, and this has a huge impact in the IAM discipline. Okay, so hope you enjoy that. Then we go to the PAN, a consolidated market in Latin America, but the idea here is to see the next generation PAN. Okay, beyond the traditional PAN. Okay, and its role in the zero trust, okay, philosophy. Okay, so hope you can enjoy this topic either. Okay, so we move to then to a very emergent topic in Latin America, but that you guys will listen a lot in the next year. It used to call blockchain identity management, but now the analysts call decentralized identity management, sometimes sovereign identity management. Okay, very hot topic for the next years. Okay, and last but not least, okay, I recommend that you don't lose it. A consumer identity case that we have here in Latin America. Okay, we have here with us my friend Marcelo Ox from Argentina, who will present this very interesting customer case. Okay, don't lose it. I know that is not easy to stay 2 hours. Okay, in a briefing, but I recommend that you try to stay. Okay. Thank you again to everyone for joining. And now I will move to Andrea, our market leader for Latin America, who will support us during all these events. Okay.
Thank you very much, Felipe. So as he mentioned, I'm the field marketing for security at IBM, okay, Latin America. I'm going to be your host today. So coming next, we have Sridhar Mupidi. So he's our IBM fellow and CTO for IBM Security, and he's going to talk about identity and access management trends.
Excellent. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Andrea. First of all, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for taking a couple of hours and spending with us and listening to a point of view. In my role as the global CTO, if you go to the next slide, right? In my role as a global CTO for IBM Security, I'm very fortunate to work with a large number of clients across financial and medical, retail, and different types of industries. I know we only have 20 minutes, so what I was hoping to do is give you a bit of some major patterns that we're seeing working with a number of clients as well as analysts, and hopefully that might help you create your strategic roadmap towards IAM and then drive towards a programmatic approach. Talking about IAM, number of you are embarking on a number of different projects, whether it is trying to ensure that you're keeping ahead of fraud and threat, which is continuing to grow, or you're trying to ensure that your business is modernizing, right? Whether enabling with mobile access or better experience from a client perspective, or be able to use APIs, as Felipe was talking about with OpenBanking and PSD2 and related standards with fintechs. A number of these initiatives are fronted by IAM these days. IAM is becoming the first line of defense, whether you're doing a tactical project or a strategic initiative like Zero Trust. If we go to the next slide, what we've seen, and just hit the animation, what you've seen is that what used to be typically an IT-centric initiative, right, which was typically done by the CIO, we've got different parts of the organization are interested in identity and access management. You can see tremendous interest from the CISO office or the Chief Information Security Office in trying to figure out how do you use identity as a context for detecting and preventing threats or fraud? How do you make sure you use analytics as a way to find those anomalous behavior in the activities and be able to stop much sooner than devastating impact? On the other side, on the far right, you also have the line of business that are accelerating with business transformations, whether you're modernizing an application, you're making it mobile ready, whether you're making it API driven for working with your ecosystem, or you're moving to cloud of some sort, whether it's public or private or a combination thereof. Experience is becoming really, really important in how customers are making, or consumers are making decisions. And that cuts right through identity and access management in terms of how do you provide that progressive registration, that ability to do proofing, provide that frictionless way of providing authentication and validation over the entire life cycle of a consumer identity. This is in addition to what we currently see with the CIO office, right, which is the IT, which is trying to keep up with identities, not just for humans, but also the non-human entities like APIs and devices, or initiatives like robotic process automation, right, or IoT. One of the recent studies that we've done, we do it every year. The good news is financial institutions are no longer the #1 area for attacks. It's the #1 is market right now in the OT and IoT area, right? So you can see how the organization is growing and how we need to go and modernize the identity and access management program. So what I'll do is take each one of these topics and share a couple of key examples or patterns to highlight the trends. So if you go to the next slide, Andrea, what you see over here is using, trust, or digital trust is another way of saying it, right, as a way to drive your identity and access management initiatives. So it's no longer, most recently, I think last week or over the weekend, we had a huge attack in Australia, telecommunication provider. 50% of the Australian IDs were compromised because of poor practices around password policies and relying on just single password. That needs to evolve to more and more context-based access, where context is coming from not just who you are, but what device that you're coming from, whether that's trusted device or untrusted device. What is the activity that you're doing, 5,000 versus 10,000? Where are you coming from? India versus China versus Peru versus Argentina versus US, and the behavior, right? Behavior of the transaction, as well as the behavior of the biometrics, right? In terms of how you use my mobile device with touch, sense, and swipe, or how I use my mouse. All of these have to come together in conjunction with other signals that we see to be able to determine that trust. Now, the attackers are doing an amazingly good job of attacking us with a coordinated effort and multidimensional AI. To be able to defend, we've got to leverage a multidimensional AI too. Things like being able to detect for bots, right? Not just in one way, but multiple ways coming together, right? Detecting phishing, right? You can see at the bottom of the picture, I know it's a small picture, but it kind of shows all the different ways that one should think about as you're detecting phishing or being able to identify that it's really the person that you're supporting. If you paint the picture, Andrea, if you do this, you can then start supporting use cases like how do you ensure that you're establishing trust during onboarding so that you're not ending up in situations where we've got attacks where bots are using to create fictitious IDs and stealing or making microtransactions, 1 cent or 2 cent type of transactions. But when you add up, that's tremendous amount of losses. Or be able to provide frictionless experience throughout the life cycle. So trust is an important part. If you go to the next slide, the other part of this theme is risk. How do you measure the risk and how do you use risk as a way to be able to drive your IAM program? There's 2 dimensions of this. One dimension is coming from making sure that the right individual has access to the right resource under the right conditions for the right purpose. Part of the zero trust philosophy, right? Least privileged access. But the reality is that in the organizations, most people are overprivileged. They don't necessarily use all their entitlements, and people tend to rubber stamp certifications. So using AI and ML to be able to determine the risk to say, who are my risky users? What are my risky applications? What are my risky entitlements? So that you can then take a programmatic approach of risk-driven certification or risk-driven access in a manner that you're limiting your exposure. The other part of risk is mitigating the risk of fraud and threat within the organization. Most of you have tremendous threat intelligence program. How do you leverage that in conjunction with your user activities? Bring those together to say, is there any anomalous activity going on to see if it's a credential stuffing attack, right? Or if you see some suspicious activity, how do you orchestrate a response, whether it's fraud or threat, to make sure that it's really the person or the identity, and then be able to quickly take some action. So this theme is all about using context, analytics, AI, and ML as a mechanism to basically drive trust and risk to do a better job of providing experience as well as minimizing the losses. Now, if you go to the next slide, it's my next theme. We talked about open banking. Felipe was mentioning that earlier in the session. There's a lot of API-driven economy which is evolving. The key point over here is we need to think about identities, not just as human entities, but also non-human entities like devices, API, remote or robotic programmable automation, or IoT, OT devices, wearables. All of these have identities, and we need to treat them as identities, exactly like how we would treat human entities. We need to discover who they are within your hybrid environment. Again, hybrid could be your on-prem or a combination of your cloud investments, whether it's public or private. Understand, what these entities are, right? And then evaluate the risk. Hey, this is an API coming in to do a financial transaction. It's much higher risk than potentially asking for the, a interest rate or a mortgage rate. We need to understand that the business context, estimate that trust or risk that we talked about earlier on, and then figure out how do you manage that consistently with a view to not only protect your digital assets, but also monitor it continuously so that we are able to take some action in case something bad happens. That comes with understanding and treating APIs very, very seriously, right? Most of the industry has used things like basic auth to be able to put some level of a secret within the APIs and conduct business. Attackers know that, and we've been seeing a lot of attacks based on that pattern. That needs to evolve. That needs to evolve to more of a revocable token type of approach. So it's just like you issue a user ID and password to a human user, being able to issue those API credentials or machine or service API invocations, as we call, authenticate them, make sure they're allowed to do only what they're supposed to do, and then be able to monitor that on a continuous basis so that we can revoke certain APIs and devices when needed. Again, treat them exactly like you would treat your privileged users at times. This becomes really serious when you're adopting or moving to some level of in a cloud journey, especially have your workloads in the cloud. Each of them have an identity, and those identities need to be governed to make sure that these workloads are protected. Otherwise, you end up with overprivileged access, and situations like Capital One attack is an example of that. Another example that we just talked about is, being able to, most of the banks and organizations are evolving from a proprietary approach of working with the ecosystem to leveraging more and more open standards. OpenBanking API is one such example where you can have potentially a fintech conduct business with your consumer, but at the end of the day, the bank owns the relationship. So how do you make sure you get that appropriate consent, as well as provide that strong authentication, and then maintain that continuous validation throughout that journey? Those are the type of things that OpenBanking API provides with standards like PSD2 that are becoming more and more prevalent across the globe. If you go to the next slide, the other part of modernization, other part of enabling business transformation is automation and an adoption of DevOps principles. I don't mean DevOps primarily to mean public cloud, but the principles of agile development and being able to do some level of cloud principles of best practices. The other part they also mentioned earlier in the discussion is that there are multiple personas touching on identity and access management, all the way from line of business to the CISO and then everybody in between, right? A unified process like DevOps or DevSecOps becomes a really good mechanism to provide that prescriptive guidance. Most of you know that if you create a gate, people know how to jump the gate. Time immemorial, we've seen that. So the point is to not to create more and more gates, but to create guardrails, so that if somebody wants to go at 50 miles an hour and a 40-mile speed limit, that's okay, as long as they are in a specific guardrails, so that you're helping the business go at a higher speed versus being a bottleneck. And the way you do that is two-pronged approach, right? One is to be able to ensure that we're using programmatic approaches, automation, agile transformation, whether you're deploying identity, whether you're configuring identity capabilities, whether you're monitoring or any other operation, so that you can be quick to react versus getting an email and trying to react to that. The second part is to infuse identity throughout this DevOps lifecycle at various stages, right? To ensure that as a developer is taking a workload and moving into the cloud, that's a privileged activity. So we need to think about the privileged access management, not only for the users that we do today, but also the applications and APIs. We need to think about governance of this agile stream, which is unlike in the previous generation where we used to think about, okay, this is Sridhar, I'm in the role of an architect. In an agile team, I could be moving across multiple teams very quickly, and we need to automate that access and governance in a manner that is fairly self-sufficient and fairly automated. These are some of the trends that we're seeing around modernization that requires the core identity and access management program to become more cloud native and cloud ready. we go to the next slide, which is the next theme, this is all about experience, right? My daughter, 21 years old, right? We've been working with an insurance company for the last 20 years. Within the first 6 months, what she came back and told me is this application is not talking to me. As a result, she dropped that insurance company and went with a different one because it had a better experience, just like that. And those decisions are happening at the consumer level. As a result, IAM needs to be baked into the personalized and native experience. What you see the video running through on the right-hand side is a simple chatbot of how you can see how seamless the experience is in terms of validating, in terms of doing a multi-factor authentication, in terms of verification, all of that in a native experience specific to that engagement, whether it's mobile, in this case, it's chat. All of that are happening by adopting progressive registration, where you're not giving a 3-page registration form, but simple registration, which has privacy and consent built into that. Then you need to validate who the person is, or who the identity is with some level of proofing. And that applies to APIs too. UK has done a really good job of validating third-party providers, right? Not everybody in the world has done that yet, right? And then enable the end user to be more self-sufficient. If you go to the next slide, finish the animation, Andrea. Thank you. Sorry about that. I think there's animation missed over there, but I think this kind of the next step of this experience, right? From how do you bring the identity, whether it's user or non-user, into a manner which is frictionless and provide that continuous frictionless experience, applies to passwordless journey as well. And it's paramount, right? It's not about subjecting the end user to 5 or 6 different types of authentication, but using 1 or 2 in a manner that becomes really seamless. So it's a journey. It's a journey from being able to start with something like an out of band where you still have control of user IDs and password, to becoming more and more decentralized with something like FIDO, which is allowing that user to bring their own FIDO devices in some cases, but not relying on specifically the password and honeypots, to all the way to decentralized identity that you're going to hear later in the day about how that journey needs to be baked into the experience of the consumer identity. So with that, I want to go to the last slide and talk about what we are seeing from a client adoption. There's a lot going on in the industry with respect to how identity is being treated by a number of clients. You can see some of that initiatives over there. I've highlighted some of the specific ones that I see specific to Latin America, specific to the financial industry, specific to some of the retail industry, things which are more consumer facing, for lack of better words, right? But at all points in time, understand that IAM is more of a journey, and you need to think about a programmatic approach of a maturity model versus more of a project. And when you take it more of a program approach, we've seen a lot more success. So one of the key trends that I also want to highlight is that IAM used to be more and more an ad hoc or a project. There's more realization coming into the market and clients that it needs to be a programmatic approach these days. So that you can think about a maturity model, start with a project, see the maturity, measure the return on investment, and then continue to go down that maturity model. With that, thank you so much for your time, and thank you again for spending your valuable time with us. As Felipe said, we will be here for additional questions or follow-ups.
Thank you very much, Sridhar. So now we have Jose Rodriguez. So he's our IBM Chief Product Architect for IAM. So thank you very much, Jose.
Hi, folks. My name is Jose Rodriguez. I am honored to be spending this morning with you and be able to talk about some of the emerging things happening on the IAM space. Next slide, please. So I'm going to look at, we're going to talk about consumer IAM. So when you hear the term CM, right, there's a definition provided by Gartner that is included on the slide. The definition itself is not very interesting, right? It stands for Consumer Identity and Access Management. I think what's interesting is what is the criteria that is used to place a given IAM program into this category. And the two things that I will highlight is the fact that the identities that the IAM system is targeted to, which in this case will be consumer identities, and also the nature of the type of applications that are being integrated with the systems, which typically are public applications that they require the user to self-register and create an account. So there's no prior relationship or mechanism for safely onboarding those users into the solution. Now, there's a number of features that Gartner identifies as key aspects of the consumer IAM journey. Just to mention a few, the fact that the user needs to self-register, the fact that at some point you have to gather consent from the user, and multiple times, in some cases you ask for consent when the user accepts the terms and conditions of your service. In other cases, the consents are more specific to a particular activity that you're doing on the application, and it's suspected that the consumer IAM technology that you're using and the program that you're managing accounts for those scenarios. You're also looking for optimizing the experience for both onboarding and authentication. You want to make it simple. You want to make sure that the different authorization flows, or as the user is navigating through the application, are properly constructed and in evaluating the right criteria to make a determination about, is this user trusted? Should this transaction be permitted? Based on all that contextual information associated with the transaction that the user is having. It also, as IAM programs have become more of a program, they are requiring a lot more visibility than what was initially expected before. So you have a number of reporting and analytics capabilities that are expected to provide, visibility into the user journey, detecting friction, detecting abandonment. You want to make sure that your, consumer IAM system is operating at, the best it can. There's also a notion that there's always multi-channel, right? There's always an experience when you're using a web browser, but there's also, enablement for mobile users to use their mobile device. And what this creates is something that Sridhar was mentioning before, is the need to have the APIs that enable developers to be able to innovate. The days of having an orchestrated integration pattern as the only way that people were going to integrate applications is over. Developers have a lot more say in organizations on how the experience and how the applications will be built, and you need to make sure that your IAM program is allowing for those things. The last thing I would mention in terms of capability is that this expectation of enabling users to interact with your system using the various social logins that are available. This continues to evolve depending the geography that you're supporting. The catalog of social providers that you have to integrate with changes. And also, there's new developments in this space with, Apple getting into, becoming a social provider, but also, the development of a technology called passkeys, where the consumption of passwordless authentication mechanisms on the consumer space is going to become widespread, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the future. So now I'm sort of breaking my rule. We're talking about the what before the why. So let's take a step back and look at the why. These capabilities are important. So if you can go to the next slide. So clients that are embarking in this digital transformation journey, where you're looking at your consumer IAM system and you're trying to optimize some of the pieces, and you're trying to evolve your solution into next generation, are really looking at three things. One is improving the customer convenience and retention. So the goal here is to drive more, to adopt more customers, right? You want to make sure that your experience entice people to use your solution and that the experience is delightful so they stay, right? So clients are looking to, find what is the most adequate user experience for their space. That way, customers can quickly discover the solutions that you provide. They can onboard very quickly and that they can get value, right? I think the patience that customers have in order to obtain value out of a consumer application is constantly decreasing. So you want to make sure that customers get to value as soon as possible. And a large part of that is that onboarding experience. Another aspect that is key in this situation is minimizing the amount of abandonment. And the abandonment happens because the users get frustrated with the experience that you provide. We had cases in which we're talking to customers and their abandonment levels are 40 or 50%. So imagine that 50% of your customers don't have a good experience onboarding and they essentially give up and never use your system. Obviously, that's not acceptable. And obviously, a large part of that is having the right consumer IAM approach. The other aspect is eliminating friction. So we all want to make sure that we have the most secure environments, but you have to balance between what is the necessary security controls that you have versus the amount of friction that you're adding to the user. There used to be this tendency where try to capture as much information during the user onboarding. That way you have all the information that you might want to use in the future in order to manage marketing campaigns or be able to nurture the user in a particular way. And that resulted in high levels of abandonment. I think the tendency now is that you want to invite users to use your applications, perhaps anonymously initially, and collect as little information as they become sanctioned users of the system, and then continue to enrich that user profile as they continue to navigate to the system, and only collect information when it's strictly necessary, and also making sure that you collect the adequate consents so you have the right governance on how that data will be used by the different parties in the organization. The second motivating factor is security and compliance. And again, I mentioned this before, it's about striking the right balance between security and convenience. Obviously, there's different stakeholders within an organization, and clients are very keen on having the right security controls in place. We are constantly under attacks. There's new threats, and there's also new regulations that require certain levels of compliance and proof of compliance. And that puts us a lot of requirements and restrictions in the things that you can do from a consumer IAM perspective. Everybody's looking to avoid that huge financial loss and the damage to your reputation by having a public data breach. So essentially what this really requires is that be able to enable more convenient ways of authentication. And this is where passwordless mechanisms for authentication provide an advantage. Because they not only improve your security posture, but they also make it more convenient for authentication. It also expands to scenarios where you have to make sure that customers are able to recover their accounts, but do it in a way that is both convenient but also secure. And lastly, you can make the most secure system by enable MFA in every single transaction, but that adds a lot of friction and abandonment. So you want to make sure that you use intelligent ways of evaluating risk around a transaction. So we only enable or enforce MFA when it's really needed and adequate. And lastly, and this is a little bit driven by organizations' transformations, is the need to have a consumer IAM system that allows innovation and evolution. What typically happens is that the business owners are going to drive their strategy. They're going to deliver those scenarios and user experiences that are required for their business case and their business goals. And they're going to do that with or without the help of the IAM system. So what we have seen in, from a lot of practitioners that we talk to is that in cases where you don't have a healthy consumer IAM approach, you get competition, you get internal competition. People start deploying their own IAM solutions that service the same user population, and that creates silos and creates fragmentation, and it also creates complexity for end users. So the important thing is that you have to have a consumer IAM system that has the right tools and also enable developers to be able to innovate using those tools. Next slide, please. So when we look at this, what we're talking about is really how do we manage that user journey, right? How do we use this term of digital trust, which essentially just signifies that evolution from a user initially discovering your service and start using your service and becoming a bona fide user of the service by completing some type of registration, and how you continue to enrich that profile and that and the level of activity that the user is having with the applications that are secure with your IAM system, and leverage that sort of organic source of information, as well as using external information that we're obtaining via our partners and evaluating a lot of the traffic that IBM has visibility to, so we can use both data sources as a mechanism to have establish that relationship of trust with the user and be able to have a point of view on how a particular user needs to authenticate, and a point of view on how a transaction that the user is performing through the system based on the value of the transaction, based on the context of the transaction, based on prior behavior of the user or perhaps the device that they're using, and be able to do an evaluation of that and making a determination on how we're going to authenticate the user, what is the assurance level that we're going to assign to that session, and use that information to continue controlling the journey of a user through your system. Next slide. So I think now we're going to move into the how. Can you go to the next slide, please? All right. So when we help customers along this journey, there's a perception that systems are well organized and that the integrations are simple to achieve because the front end gives a perspective that everything is organized and systems are consolidated with each other and integrated. But in reality is, as you start working with the different stakeholders in a corporation and you start looking at different systems that are holding consumer information that you want to make available as part of the consumer journey, and also you want to nurture and enrich to be able to provide a higher level of engagement with the consumer, what you find is that it's a little bit of a challenge and difficulty to be able to integrate all the systems. Now, consumer IAM doesn't have to be this way, and I think the important piece here is to have a good approach for accomplishing and also having the right tools. So next slide, please. So when we look at this from a program perspective and how you organize yourself and your corporation to be able to achieve this, I think you have to consider 4 different communicators or stakeholders that you want to engage with. And we have created sort of a model on how to accomplish this, where you're considering 4 different stages of what your IAM program needs to accomplish. The first one is the capture, and this is where you're primarily working with your chief marketing officer. You want to make sure that the technology that you provide has the right registration experience. You have the ability to customize the flow so you can accommodate questions from your internal clients. You also want to be able to support multiple brands. We have customers that A conglomerate might have, 15, 20 different brands that they have to accommodate, and they want to reuse the same IAM system to support all of them. You want to, determine what is the right experience for mobile. What is the level of friction that you want to impose, and how does the look and feel looks like? So it's important to get buy-in from the marketing folks to make sure that the right user experience and engagement with the customer is achieved. When you move to the next stage of your deployment, you're talking about the engage, and this is primarily with your IAM teams. And this is understanding what are the technology that we need, what are the capabilities that we're going to make available to our consumers. Do we have the types of MFA that we're looking for? What are the single sign-on scenarios that we want to accomplish? How do we automate the application onboarding experience? I think in my experience, a lot of the IAM programs have a lot of difficulties being able to onboard new apps. The time frame might be months, where what you want is to have an agile environment where people can self-register their applications, they can test their integration, and they can leverage standard or patterns-based integrations that don't require a lot of new development, a lot of new thinking, and they can just use the prescribed recipes to be able to do that. And this is, you have to look at this holistically. You have to look at all the channels that you're going to support. You have to look about what are the local policies that you want to have on your authentication. What is the type of notifications that you want to create? What are the social providers that you want to enable? Those are the things that are a little bit of a negotiation between the marketing team deciding what is the right experience, and then the engage team or the IAM team figuring out how to make it based on the technology we have. The third stage is the manage, and this is primarily from a chief information security officer perspective. Here, what we're looking for is, how do we comply with regulations? How do we do the right things with regards to managing customer data, PII? How do we comply with GDPR? How do we get the right consent to be able to use the data in the ways that we wanna use it? Make sure that the data that we capture is absolute minimum. And how do we create a journey when customers are leveraging additional capabilities where additional information is required, and how do we obtain that information to make sure that we are allowed to use the data in the way that we want to use it? This is essentially an emerging topic. This continues to change, the regulation change, and this is a huge challenge for developers and the privacy officer on an organization. And so there is capabilities that consumer IAM technology needs to account for in order to simplify this journey for the team that is implementing the solution. And we'll talk a little bit more about those capabilities shortly. And the last stakeholder that want to make sure is on board is the chief information officer. This is where you start to look at what is your security posture, how you execute on the program, where is the solution going to be provisioned, are we going to go cloud-based, are we going to go on-premise? Think about how your team is going to be able to not only operate the environment but support it, and what are the different use cases that you want to do? Are we protected? How do we avoid being on the news and be subject to a breach? So next slide. So I leave you with the following, and you can go through the animation. So what you want is a platform that allows you to increase the speed in which your business moves. And so here, what we're talking about primarily is the how. What is the technology and what is the characteristics of that technology that allow you to achieve those business goals when you look at it from the lens of consumer IAM? I'll mention a few and what is the value of those. Essentially, these are has been the North Star or the guiding principle for our development of our own IAM business and how we're developing our different capabilities and how we offer some of those capabilities in an easily to consume way from the cloud. So the first thing is that you need a IAM program that evolves quickly. You need a solution that is constantly adding additional integration patterns, that is constantly being renovated with new technology, new use cases. And I think a microservices-based architecture for that allows a provider to be able to deliver new capabilities constantly and to be able to increase the frequency in which new technology is made available. The second aspect or principle is API first. Data flows as well as API-based integration. You have to enable the developers to create. That means not only have all the APIs exposed, but have the right recipes and API documentation for them to be able to create. This is huge. This avoids the creation of silos. This gets buy-in from the internal consumers that are integrating with the IAM platform, and that will drive not only usage, but it will eliminate the need to divert, which in some cases some business owners might do in the absence of the right technology. You have to support multiple brandings because you have to allow designers and marketing people to be able to achieve whatever the experiences they want. This is very important, not only to support multiple brands, but also to support different experiences based on the value of the customer. You might want to treat people if you're a financial institution, and you might want to treat people slightly different if they have a high balance in their accounts, right? They have a lot of buying power, so you want to make sure that you cater for those VIPs or important customers. The other aspect is you want to have modular deployments, and the important here is that you want to leverage your existing investment. The ability to rip and replace is non-existent, right? You have to evolve the solution that you have to be able to service your customers in new ways, and you need to be able to evolve. So how do you evolve is by having integration patterns between your existing infrastructure and what you're leveraging new, and also have a journey where it allows you to continue to modernize your infrastructure to use new capabilities. The solution needs to be comprehensive. It needs to have enough support. You need support for passwordless. You need support for new ways for doing MFA. You need to be on the cutting edge of adopting new technology. You have to use adaptive ways for authenticating people and making sure that you're evaluating all the different contexts available to decide what is the right authentication. As a side note, right, I was mentioning how passwordless was initially viewed as a enterprise-only type of solution because only enterprise were going to require this. But more and more, we're seeing how passwords are responsible for all the breaches, all the attacks, and companies like Apple, IBM, and Google are working together to be able to evolve this technology in a way that is more consumable for consumers. So you'll see development here around passkeys and making multi-device password-led authentication solutions available. So that will make it more feasible to be consumed in a consumer use case. The solution needs to also be able to scale to all the different enterprise sizes. Your company might be small today, but you might have significant results in your strategy, and it needs to grow quickly. So you need to make sure that the solution you choose is able to accommodate that growth. Privacy and consent are also evolving. Here, our view has been that we want to make it easier for people to comply by enabling developers to achieve this integration, but also give a framework where a privacy officer can decide what is your privacy policy and have some rules of engagements between the developer and the privacy officer so things can be done properly. And lastly, it needs to be secure. Obviously, you want to avoid the embarrassment of a breach. So with that, Thanks for your time, and I'll give control back to Andrea.
Thank you, Jose. That was amazing. So coming next, we have Vivek Shankar. So he's a product architect for IBM Security Verify, and he's going to talk about open banking. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you, Andrea. Hi, everybody. My name is Vivek Shankar. I'm actually calling to you from Singapore, and I'm the product architect for IBM Security Verify as a service. I'm also IBM's representative unofficially for a number of standards-based discussions in the OAuth and OpenID Connect Foundation. So let's talk about open banking and open finance, which is a germinating set of regulations that we are seeing in your part of the world. Let's move to the next slide, Andrea. Thank you. So what is open banking and by extension open finance? Open banking is an initiative that is really addressing a consumer problem where consumers are demanding more services and capabilities from fintechs and organizations that are outside of your bank that provide specialized services. For example, payment transactions. For example, collecting your credit information so that they can render a credit score, and so on and so forth. And to protect consumers, open banking was coined, and it started out in the UK region, and then it's now expanded to practically every part of the world in one form or the other. And the gist of it is there are banks that are going to be exposing the user's financial footprint in the form of open APIs that facilitate the exchange of this data and possibly even processes such as payment. And users need a mechanism through which they can authorize these actions and what sort of information that is being shared, which is typically rather fine-grained in terms of what they'd like to share. For example, do I want to share my mortgage history? Do I want to share my account transaction history, and so on and so forth? Now, in your part of the world, Brazil has taken the lead in actually building a set of very strong regulations and practices, which is part of the Brazil Security Working Group, and that's part of the OpenID Foundation. Now, Verify and Verify Access provide capabilities in this space. And let's move to the next slide, Andrea. Sorry. So Verify and Verify Access are both capable of providing, checking all the boxes for you to successfully implement a secure open banking implementation. Now, while we say open banking, underpinning all of this is the ability to manage and provide capabilities for third-party providers to register and manage their applications, to provide security tokens through a strong mechanism, a stringent mechanism to ensure that user authorization is non-revocable. It's a form of consent that cannot be disputed, and so on. And all of this requires secure customer authentication. In addition to all of these standard capabilities, we also offer out-of-the-box financial fraud prevention through the use of our IBM Trusteer technology and out-of-the-box threat detection and response capabilities. And you have the option of using a SaaS service that does all of this. You also have the ability to make use of our on-premise or a platform as a service deployment through Verify Access. Let's move to the next slide, Andrea. Thank you. Now, rather than just talk about this, I'm going to quickly show you a demo of this in action, where we're going to see a very, not a very pretty app because I wrote it, and I'm not known for my user experience skills, but it's meant to show you how a user is accessing an e-commerce application and kicking off payment. And as part of that process, how they go through how a user authorization is completed using the Verify platform. So with that, I'm going to take the share and we'll get started. All right. So I hope all of you are able to see my screen. And here's where, so consider that this is a e-commerce application. You're Amazon.com or whatever it be, and you're at a point where you've purchased a bunch of things and you're going to complete a payment transaction through your bank. And I'll go ahead and kick off the authentication process. And this particular, now as part of that process, the application, which is not provided by your bank, it has to go and authenticate with the bank, right? And you have to be part of that process. And so we're going to use a strong phishing-resistant passwordless technology called FIDO. And I'm going to use my Touch ID on my MacBook, and I'm going to complete that authentication flow. And what I see as a consumer is let me zoom in a little bit, a consent page where I'm authorizing a transaction of that amount for so-and-so merchant. And there's a reference number that you can now use that's part of your consent authorization. And this is where the link gets created between your transaction, your authentication transaction, and your consent. And this is where I go ahead and complete the flow, and the payment transaction has been completed, right? So this is a very simple flow that just illustrates how all of this works. Now, if I were to take a peek at what do these consents look like, you notice that it's a payment consent or for a particular transaction ID, and I've authorized it. Now, if I had denied that transaction, that would also be recorded. So that's a mechanism that can be used now to feed that into your threat analysis systems that can actually detect that there is a third-party provider that might be performing some fraudulent actions, and which is why users are cluing into that and starting to deny those transactions and so on. So that's a very quick presentation of what Verify offers. As I said, we offer this both on our on-premise and on our SaaS capabilities, on our SaaS properties, and it's very easy for you to set this up and get going. So let's, with that, I'm going to hand this back to Andrea. Andrea, could you switch back? Thanks. Okay, so what you just saw was a typical payment transaction where a user went through the process of kicking off a payment, and under the hood, it made use of some advanced OAuth capabilities to obtain a security token, and that security token was used to complete the process of authentication. So rather than go, if you're interested in the details and you would like a deep dive, please reach out to us and we can schedule some time and go through it in great detail. So with that, I'm going to hand this over back to Andrea to take this forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vivek. So now we have Dinesh Jain. So he's our IBM Security Verify product manager, and he's going to talk about privileged access management. Thank you.
Andrea, and thanks everyone for joining this session. Now, as we looked at different forms and factors around the consumer use cases, open banking, let's take a look at privileged access management, one of the growing and emerging area where we have seen a lot of excitements from our customers in Latin America. Now, privileged access management is not new. This is like a well-known security practice that most of the organizations has adopted by the time. And those who may not be aware of, the privileged access management really helps you to protect, secure, control, and manage your privileged accesses to the critical assets. There are foundational use cases when we talk about privileged access management, about discovering, managing, governing privileged accounts, controlling the access to those accounts, rotating the passwords, and monitoring or recording and auditing the privileged credentials. I mean, this area, as I mentioned, is not new, but what has been changed over the period of time as customers have started deploying a privileged access management solution. In the earlier eras, we looked at everything being on-premise. Customers were looking for applying a vaulting solution to protect enterprise administrative users. As we see today, customers are living in a hybrid multi-cloud reality. Customers have on-premise applications, customers' data has been moved to cloud. Some of the privileges has grown not only from human users to the different types of privileged user personas, as well as different types of cloud and SaaS applications as well. Now, this is really where privileged access management gets more tricky, and one need to understand the whole landscape of what is really the environment that we are living in today and what type of privileged users we need to pay attention to in order to provide a better zero trust principles to our infrastructure. There is also a mandate you might have heard from zero trust principles perspective never trust, always verify, enforce the least privileges. Privileged users are really the most choices of the attackers in terms of compromising the credentials, gaining the privileged accesses. If not protected well, I think privileged users can make more damages if those gets compromised. This is really where we need to look at privileged users are now beyond human or IT users. The scope of the privileged users has been now significantly grown from applications communicating to applications, where developers are embedding hard-coded credentials, certificates, or the application secrets into their applications. Business users are empowered with some elevated accesses to their applications, and remote workers quite oftenly and outsourced IT organizations are also managing major companies' infrastructure entitlements as well. This is really where privileged users are now beyond IT administrators. The scope of managing the privileged users within the firewall of an organization has changed now towards protecting SaaS or cloud infrastructures, the privileged users accessing those environments, as well as from different devices and different environments or the applications as well. Now, I think this is really where the whole PAM has been evolved from use cases perspective, from a consumption of a privileged access management solution perspective. Now, if you go to the next slide, as I mentioned, privilege access management is a well-defined, well-established security practice. A lot of customers have a PAM solution one way or the other, but most of the organizations have a false sense of confidence when it comes to protecting their organizations against cybersecurity attacks. That could be ransomware attacks as an example, because we have seen most of the organizations are having weak or incomplete protection of privileged users, workstations, and the enterprise servers. What are such common privilege access gaps if you look at? Most of the time, we have seen customers applying Vault in order to secure passwords, letting administrators not to embed the passwords into the systems or not to share the passwords. This is really where a basic vaulting solution starts getting implemented in an organization, which is really a great start. This is what we also recommend for every customer to start with. However, when we look at growing with the number of sophisticated attacks, cybersecurity attacks that are happening, just applying a vault solution is not enough. One also need to look at some of the growing problems around privileged users and their access entitlements, where there are entitlements that are growing. It's difficult to control which privileged user access to what in terms of inconsistent policies and exposing higher risks when it gets compromised. Most of the cases, as Sridhar explained about some of the breaches that has happened recently, are prone to happen because of the weak authentication if they are applied and privilege accounts are getting compromised. Besides protecting privileged users with the vault solutions, we also look at customers struggling with lack of endpoint protection for their workstations, as well as enterprise servers, where even if you have secured the passwords, attackers can still get entry into your enterprise servers, maybe via weak workstations. We also see a lot of times applications are using elevated accesses to connect to backend databases, to connect to backend repositories, and have embedded credentials into those systems. This is really where privilege access management use cases goes beyond basic vaulting use cases that one needs to be aware of. And when we consolidate everything as per the broader zero trust principles, there is no one single product or a security tool that can give you a zero trust value unless you are really thinking a broader zero trust approach, and that can also apply for privileged users, and a PAM solution can be really effective if you really think it from a broader zero trust perspective. These are really some of the common privilege access gaps or challenges we have seen customers struggling with, or some of the customer situations where customers were compromised with the security breaches kind of provides insights that the PAM solution that they applied was not really effective. And that's the reason one really needs to look at the next generation PAM solution in general. Now we talked about some of the gaps. We talked about how the PAM landscape has evolved. On the next slide, let's take a look at a realistic ransomware attack. Ryuk was one of the most famous ransomware attack that happened. It was an exemplar double extortion ransomware attack that targeted major financial organizations. Now, if you look at the initial access and a foothold was actually obtained in an organization with campaign, and the whole environment started infecting after staging and recon. Now, the hackers get into the system, but the whole idea is getting privileged accesses so that the whole ransomware can further expand and can get the more value by accessing some of the critical data, critical users in the organization. This is really where this particular ransomware expanded with gaining privileged accesses by acquiring the domain administrative credentials, where attackers were able to move laterally on other systems via PowerShell script access and perform some of the heavy operations on those systems. Now, this is really just like a real-time example of a ransomware attack, but the whole idea is if you have a privilege access management solution, you really need to think about a broader spectrum of the use cases where just applying Vault is not enough. It's a good start, but there is more to it that we need to look at from a privilege access management use cases perspective. Now, as we move further, what IBM has to offer in this space, where the overall PAM products has evolved, matured, what kind of use cases we can look at from a broader privilege access management solution perspective. So on the next slide, just to get on the context where IBM Security Verify product portfolio, where we looked at some of the consumer use cases today. We also provide a comprehensive privilege access management solution. The privilege Verify privilege offering is our OEM product that we OEM from our OEM partner Delinea. Earlier, it used to be Thycotic. Thycotic Centrify merger has led towards formation of Delinea, and that's what IBM is strategic as an OEM partner with Delinea from Verify privilege offering perspective. On the next slide, you could look at a comprehensive PAM product portfolio that IBM offers, which is really a more powerful PAM solution, but a really made easy with IBM Security Verify offering. Now, this is really the place where you will look at basic vaulting use cases. We also cater to further going beyond enterprise human privilege users towards managing the high velocity secrets, applying or enforcing least privilege policies, controlling the application rights on the endpoints and the workstations. And more, this area has also grown significantly towards minimizing the overall attack surface and controlling privilege accesses to the enterprise servers with just-in-time, just enough privileges as well. This is really where IBM offers a comprehensive catalog based upon the maturity you are today in applying a PAM solution in your organization. You can start the journey. And as you iterate further, you can further make it more and more matured PAM solution that can be holistically providing a zero trust value to your organization. Now, this is really where a powerful PAM solution that IBM provides, going beyond just the basic or a pinpoint PAM solution use cases perspective. If you look at on the next slide, where IBM comprehensively provides a broader value of a PAM solution, if you really embed this with your threat, with your data security, with your identity governance and access management side of the use cases. This is really where, as I mentioned, a single solution may not be able to achieve zero trust, but if you integrate them together well in the context of a privileged user with threat, data, and identity side of the house, it really provides you a real effective solution from the privilege vault or from the privilege access management use cases perspective. And there are a number of such integration points that IBM security system provides with integrating a privilege management solution with different sets of or the sides of a security solution. I will strongly encourage to you guys to refer to some of the artifacts that are available on the IBM's marketplace website that really talks about all these integrations that are provided out of the box. We are going to talk very few integration points in this session today, and that will help you to understand the next generation privilege access management solution. How can you be prepared with that as well? So coming back to the basic vaulting use cases and a broader ecosystem of the integrations that we have, we have an out-of-the-box integration use case on the next slide, if you look at, that really provides an integrated zero trust solution for avoiding the privilege account misuse. If you have effective privilege vault use cases that has applied integrated with your existing SIM technology, it could be QRadar or Splunk, or could be any other SIM integrated solution. Combining it together with CloudPack for security can really help you to provide a holistic zero trust solution to start with. And you can achieve overall zero trust value, starting with some of the foundational use cases and going further down the line with making it more advanced and optimized as well. As I mentioned, the solution really provides really great value from a basic, PAM use cases, but then a real integration power with how do we exchange the event data with your SIM solution like QRadar or Splunk, and how do we further utilize CloudPack for security for kicking off the workflow for the remediation or quarantining the user accesses. That's really where an integrated solution can provide you a great value and take you to the next generation on the PAM journey itself. Now, this is just one example. Going beyond this, on the next slide, you look at the Verify privilege solution also deeply integrates with Guardian Data Insights. Guardian Data Insights, the release that has happened, which is 3.0, actually provided a deeper integration with Verify privilege offering, where you can understand who are the risky users behind the privilege credentials once a suspicious data anomaly is identified and shown on the Guardian Insights dashboard. This is really where you can analyze and prioritize your data related risks and share better data insights with your SOC team from an integrated Guardian and a PAM solution perspective. This really takes you towards your beyond pinpoint PAM use cases towards an integrated data and a privilege access management solution perspective. Now, on the next slide, Sridhar talked about in his session, talked a bit about overall DevSecOps and the DevOps use cases perspective, how organizations are adopting hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure and how DevSecOps is becoming more important there as well. We also look at DevSecOps or the DevOps in terms of high velocity secrets, where applications are communicating to applications, developers are writing the code where they are entering the credentials, utilizing the certificates, SSH keys as an examples, or maybe leveraging the DevOps tools in order to connect to the DevOps or the backend databases as well. This is really where an effective high velocity secrets management solution is needed, and with the help of DevOps Vault, which primarily integrates or caters to non-human privilege accounts. Those are really application secrets, shared service accounts, applications communicating to other applications, leveraging the credentials is become an important part of the use cases that gets handled. First and foremost, we look at replacing hard-coded credentials with the help of DevOps Vault. We also look at dynamic secrets for infrastructure as service and for the databases, how DevOps Vault can be utilized in this space as well. And beyond just the user IDs and the passwords, we also look at certificate issuance, SSH key issuance. These are becomes additional secrets that we need to look at from a DevOps Vault perspective as well. Those are some of the next generation privilege access management use cases. I would strongly encourage you to look at if you are having a Vault solution, go beyond that and look at the spectrum of the use cases to mature your current PAM deployment. Going further, on the next slide, you could also look at the DevOps Vault, which is meant for high velocity secrets, also tightly integrates with Red Hat OpenShift as well as the Kubernetes technology in terms of effectively managing the secrets securely. With the integration of privilege offering that allows you to secure OpenShift or Kubernetes secrets without making any big changes into your existing deployments. As a lot of organizations are adopting container-based deployment strategy for their applications, for their business codes, this is really becoming an important aspect to secure secrets that are managed by OpenShift or Kubernetes integrated with a Vault solution. Going further beyond, we talked about the basic vaulting, advanced vaulting use cases, secrets, high velocity secrets management. Now, this is really one of the interesting and growing area where Even after you have a basic vault solution catered with your human as well as non-human users, or with your high velocity secrets, we still look at how can we protect enterprise servers. This is really where applying the principles of least privilege policies, applying the principles of privilege elevation, privilege delegation management, as well as strong authentication comes into the picture. This particular chart really provides two broader use cases that you can effectively apply with protecting your enterprise servers with the help of Privileged Server Suite. First and foremost, for applying the least privilege principles, Server Suite really helps you to consolidate complex and disparate Unix and Windows systems with the help of innovative technology called as AD bridging. You can also, on top of that, create least access, least privilege principles catered across your hybrid infrastructure, centralize and automate your local accounts and groups management, and then centrally configure the policies that can be used throughout when the user is authenticating against Active Directory, as an example. Once your identity is consolidated and a basic principle is established from a least privilege principles perspective, you can further apply privilege elevation and strong authentication use cases, wherein a privileged user is a no longer privileged user for all the time. In fact, you would look at role-based privilege elevation, time-based role assignment of a privileged access to a particular resource. We often talk about MFA at the time of login, but with the help of privilege solution, you can also look at MFA at the time of privilege elevation during the runtime flows can be applied further as well. And there has been a fine level command line level granularity that you can apply as your administrators are going to access your Unix Windows systems. Those are primarily your enterprise servers as well. That's really where the privileged users and applying the principles of least privilege, privilege elevation use cases helps you to really protect your enterprise servers besides the basic traditional vaulting use cases. Now, as a takeaway of this whole overall PAM solution, I would really advise you to take a look at your PAM journey, which is really on the next slide. So when you look at, you have an effective PAM solution. Is it really an effective? Is it really a zero trust proof? Is it really protecting your organization against all possible type of cyber attacks? Really protecting your all types of privileged users? And this is really where we look at how can you become successful with foundational use cases wherein you can gain visibility, reduce the attack surface to start with. That's really a great start to deploy a PAM solution. Going further, you also need to look at an enhanced model of a privilege access management from a next generation use cases perspective, wherein you can apply just in time, just enough privileges with your privilege solution effectively. And as systems are getting scaled up, as new privilege users are getting discovered, getting managed, you further look at down the line of detecting suspicious activities of those privileged users, enforcing the actions on those suspicious activities, and applying principles of least privilege policy principles, elevation, and the delegation management use cases as well. That's really the way where you can assess yourself, where your PAM journey is. If you have IBM's PAM solution, we have a path to take you to the next levels as based upon the components that you have deployed. However, if you have any other PAM solution that you're using today, it could be maybe CyberArk, Beyond Trust, SenseGera, and so forth. We also have an effective use cases around server suite technology, around DevOps use cases that you can really complement your current PAM deployment and add value to really grow maturity from your overall zero trust principles perspective as well. So the use cases pretty much runs in parallel with your basic vaulting solution, no matter whether you have from IBM or from any other vendor in the market in general. That's really where you can look at, from a next generation PAM perspective, assess your environment and get ready for the next generation use cases as well. That's all I have from the privilege access management side of the house. I'll maybe watch the chat and respond to the questions if those have come up through.
Amazing, Dinesh. Thank you very much. So now we have Milan Patel. He's product management for IBM Security Verify. So thank you very much, Milan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. As Andrea mentioned, I'm on the product management team for IBM Security Verify. And today I have the pleasure of talking about some of the innovation work that we're doing in IBM Security Verify, specifically around how we are going to evolve what we're talking about in the consideration of digital identity. So with that, let's start. This segment of the conversation is going to just set the context. We're going to show live demos of what we're doing in IBM related to digital credentials and digital identity, and then give you a view into how we're planning to productize this in the context of IBM Security Verify. So with that, let's get started. So the question really stems from a really basic one, which is, how do you prove that you are who you are, and what is identity? So typically when we talk about identity, and the people that are on this call immediately shift to what is seen in the light blue on the internet. And everything that you've heard to date is really in the consideration of, am I using strong passwords? Am I not using breached passwords? Am I using strong authenticators? Am I able to leverage things like risk-based authentication to assess fraud? A lot of that is in the context of what applications I have access to, what resources I have access to. Now, if you've asked other people, what is identity? Sometimes what they'll do is they'll take out something that we all typically have in our pockets, which is this. And this has credentials. But what we've done is we've created a barrier of how we've done things in the real world, where interactions are peer-to-peer, and the interactions are a trusted metadata exchange. Not what I have access to, but who I am, and the level of attributes that I as a user want to present. So when we think about this, a lot of organizations are wrestling with, okay, how do I blur these two mediums into a digital first type of interaction and a digital first type of experience for end users, both employees and consumers. Now, I know there's a lot of conversations around, decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, but this ultimately boils down to, I would say, three major drivers that we're seeing. One is just the modernization of traditional constructs of identity. We're talking about badges, license, passports, receipts, membership, loyalty cards. There's a show that is in the 90s was televised, and there's a scene where someone is fumbling through all the receipts that they have in their wallet and can't find anything, right? So it's about how do you modernize those traditional processes that are predicated and that are based on paper and plastic. The second shift to this type of digital credentialing experience is we've talked about flows like OpenID Connect, SAML. Here, the user's at the beginning of the transaction. The user logs in, the user then goes to a relying party, the relying party then goes to the identity provider, right? The order in terms of how we've been doing identity digitally is a little bit different than what we've typically experienced in the physical world, where in the physical world, the issuer gives the credential to the user presents it to the verifier, right? So we're shifting just the order of operation. And then the last thing is around credential portability, right? So being able to take credentials that were issued outside of the domain of where you typically use them and being able to use them in different business contexts. So a big use case that comes up is know your customer. But what digital credentials can help, just like FIDO, just like QR code, is passwordless authentication, but also passwordless onboarding, right? And you'll see a little bit what that means here in the next few demos. Now, the question becomes, why now? So we alluded to a lot of analyst drivers and a lot of analyst considerations in terms of, where is the market going? There was a recent article published Yahoo Finance and talked about some market analysis about verifiable credentials and decentralized identity being a quite a large market by 2030. The other hype cycles associated with the evolution of various technologies and considerations have decentralized identity at the hype cycle for many permutations and business needs, right? So there's the identity and access management hype cycle. There's the privacy hype cycle. And then there's also digital government hype cycle. And then when we think about what the art of the possible is from an identity and access management standpoint and how verifiable credentials can help, analysts consider this as a transformational type of technology, not just in what it allows from an experience standpoint, but what it allows in terms of the ability to share and control various data elements from an individual perspective. So with that, what I wanted to do is really queue up and share really what we're doing in IBM and really put this in the context of how this technology can be experienced. So what you should be able to see is a web page. And this is, again, something that IBM HR is doing, leveraging verifiable credentials. But before I get into that, what I want to show you is my phone. So my phone is on the right. What we didn't necessarily talk about was today when we do QR code, when we do passwordless, when we do TOTP, we have a mobile app. It's called IBM Verifier. You can go down to the Apple App Store right now and download it. And it's an authenticator app. And you'll be able to use multi-factor for TOTP and other things, right, as you're accessing your own personal websites. So that's app 1. App 2 is what we're talking about now, which is, call it a digital wallet. And this wallet is on your phone that allows you to store and manage different credentials. So you can see different credentials that I've been issued. Clearly, these are not real companies. These are just for the purposes of demos, but you can see a digital rendering of a driver's license. What I'm going to walk you through is how I'm able to obtain digital credentials and what IBM with your credentials is doing, just to give you a mental mapping of how this experience can be defined. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a website. And in this case, it's your creds at IBM. And the experience here is to obtain digital credentials. So I'm going to go create an account. But before I can create an account, I need to do some proofing. And in this proofing is I need to provide some level of verification that this is me. Now, internally at IBM, we use IBM Security Verify, the identity as a service, to enable passwordless authentication. And in this case, before I can interact with the website, I'm going to use FIDO. So I just touched my MacBook Touch, and now I'm into the website because now the application knows it's me, right? As part of a login flow. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to now obtain digital credentials that IBM HR has about me. So I'm going to agree to the privacy statement, right? I'm going to go to the next step. Just because I have the mobile wallet on my phone, I don't have to go through this scanning process. This basically allows me to download the app just through a QR code. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect, right? So consider this as the issuer. My phone is the holder. So I'm going to initiate a connection. So now I have a peer-to-peer relationship with IBM from my mobile wallet. And when I go into my connection side of the application or mobile app, you can see I am now connected. And this is our pairwise relationship. This is just like you going into a bank and you're saying, here, let me hand you my credential. Before you hand the credential, you have a connection that you've made. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to all the credentials that IBM has. Now, one thing that they have about me is a digital business card. So I'm going to add that to my wallet. What this is going to do, it's going to send a message to my wallet. And it's going to say, hey, Milan, do you want a credential? Notice how it's branded with the IBM logo up top. And these are all the live pieces of data they have about me, right? Because they know that's my work address, that's my mobile number. So I'm going to press OK. And now I've stored this digital credential in my wallet. I can click into that credential, and you can see all the attributes that they've issued to me. The other thing I can do, and again, a credential could be a lot of things, right? So I need to prove that I have certain competencies. So I'm going to ask for certain credentials to be issued to me. And now IBM, as HR, is issuing me 2 more digital credentials, and I'm accepting those credentials. So you can see different credentials, when they were issued, when they expire, etc. Now, what I've done is I've gotten the credentials. The next thing is, okay, how do I use those credentials? Okay, so I'm going to go to a, again, fictitious bank account, and I don't have a relationship with this bank, right? But to be able to establish a relationship with this bank, I need to prove my identity. So I'm going to say, hey, I want to sign up for an account, okay? And it says you need proof of employment and a driver's license. Well, luckily for me, I just showed you the driver's license and I just showed you proof of employment. So now I'm going to establish a relationship with them. The importance here is I'm able to pass metadata attributes about me that is needed to establish a level of trust. So what I'm going to do now is, again, notice when I'm signing up for an account, I'm not typing a single word in the account creation process, right? I'm scanning it. This allows for a connection. So I'm establishing a peer-to-peer connection. And now what the bank's going to do is going to send me a proof request. They'll prove certain attributes about who you are. And these are all the attributes they want. And they're able to capture it because it's available in my wallet. And me as a user am now going to just ensure that these are the right things that I want to send. And I'm going to click OK. This is generating a proof, and it's basically packaging up the credential and sending it to the bank to verify. Now, a verifier can also be an issuer. So now they're going to issue me a bank credential with bank details. So I'm going to accept that credential in my wallet. Now, the importance here is the users now accumulating these credentials, right? They're able to see who all do I have relationships with. And you can see that. What all have I shared and permissioned? And from here, I have the ability to, again, interact in a digital medium. But if I were to interact with someone in person, they could scan this QR code, or they could scan this barcode. So you can see how some of the concepts of identity are becoming a little bit more blurred in the notion of what we're seeing and how we see this evolving over time. Okay, so enough of the demo. The next thing that I want to showcase and talk about is, okay, so how is this actually happening? So there's a set of communities and projects in the Linux Foundation, Hyperledger Indy, Hyperledger Aries, Hyperledger Ursa, that we are building on top of. So similar to IBM's overall strategy around open source and community, this is evident through how and why we acquired Red Hat. Open source is critical because of the community collaboration and being able to deliver value in a collaborative way. So these are the projects that we're currently building on top of and productizing and operationalizing. What we have in market today is a technology preview. Now, this technology preview is outside of the core Verify platform today. It still allows you to do what I just showed you in the context of delivering and showcasing that experience. But what I want to get to now is how we're going to deliver this digital credential type of experience in the context of IBM Security Verify. So with that, before I get into that, I want to just give you an overview. This is IBM Security Verify. This is a tenant. It's an IDaaS, 100% cloud native. We have regions across the globe. And basically, all admins need to do is come to this URL and they're able to access their environment. From here, they're able to add applications. And there's a walk me guide through that shows you how to add applications, but you can add various applications. Again, today, like Vivek showed and others talked about, right? There's various capabilities in the platform today, right? Jose alluded to a lot of the consumer identity access management flows. What I really want to get to is in Verify, there's the ability to manage authenticators and manage how users and the mechanisms they use to prove who they are, right? And today, this is the way that we do it. We have a profile page. In security, you're able to manage all the authenticators. Here, you can add a device, right? A device could be an authenticator app, could be a FIDO, could be a text message, email. Now, how we look to deliver this in the context of Verify is leveraging the existing competencies of what it means to be an IAM solution. And that means being able to allow a mechanism for being able to set up a digital wallet, as I just showed you with what I did with IBM HR. Being able to register the mobile app with an issuer, as I just showed you with IBM HR. And then being able to obtain a digital credential, right? As I just showed you with IBM HR. Now, ultimately, where we see this going is in the context of Verify, we have the ability to integrate with identity agents. So these could be user registries on-prem, Active Directory, LDAP. We also have the ability to have a cloud-native directory. But ultimately, this is how we see and evolve decentralized identity. And we want to just showcase to you what we're doing and how we're innovating in that space. I know I'm 2 minutes over, and I don't want to take any more time away from Marcelo. So thanks for taking the time, and hopefully this session was valuable.
Thank you very much. So now we have our amazing Marcelo Ox. So he's the lead security architect and IAM lead at OSDE. He's from Argentina. So all the presentation is yours, Marcelo. You're in mute, Marcelo. If you could take the mute off. Thank you very much.
And well, I was saying hi to everyone. Sorry, I was mute. And well, thanks for staying to listen to me as the last one speaking today. And I'm going to be talking about OSDE journey with an IBM Security Verify. Okay. So next slide, please, Andrea. Well, I'm Marcelo Ox, the security architect, and I am lead at OSDE. I've been working 22 years in technology, and the last 8 years I focus on security. I speak Spanish and some Portuguese, so if you have questions, you can write them in Spanish or in Portuguese, and I will try to answer them after the talk. I'm gonna leave some minutes to be able to answer your questions at the end. So what is OSDE? OSDE is the #1 health insurance company in Argentina, and we have more than 2.3 million customers, and we provide health and care services to them. The way we provide those services is not directly, but we have hired more than 200,000 health service providers to give these health services to our customers. And we are using IBM Security Verify as our CIAM, as our customer identity and access management tool. So all our needs regarding authentication, authorization, and accounting of our customers and health service providers is being solved by ISP. Okay, so next slide, please. Well, our journey began in 2019, and back then the company decided to give a top priority to the digital transformation of our services, mainly to our customers. Okay, we already had back then some services, some digital services, but the idea was to be able to provide everything digitally. Okay, So, and our context back then was that we have several custom login implementations, and mostly they were based on cookie sessions, but our users need to use different username and password for different services. So it wasn't an ideal situation. It wasn't centralized, okay? And these implementations were tightly coupled with our business applications. So every time we wanted to do an upgrade on an improvement on our login or authentication systems, we also have to rebuild and redeploy our business applications. That meant a lot of time and a lot of testing and dependency with other teams. All of this was working on-prem, and it was built mainly on deprecated technology in some cases, and we were using technology that was 20 years old. And we knew also back then that our availability wasn't as high as we were gonna be needing, okay? So we knew that we had some downtime, maybe at night, for example, or on the weekends, but we also discovered that we were not measuring our availability correctly. So we didn't know exactly how low it was, okay? So when we have to start working with this digital transformation process, we knew that we wanted to find a way to authenticate our users and securely, okay, in all the new applications that the company was gonna build. So we were thinking of building microservices, mobile applications, single-page applications. We needed to find a way to authenticate our users securely. But also we wanted it to be centralized and decoupled from our business applications. We wanted to have only one identity provider for all our users, okay? We wanted to give them only one account, okay? So each user will only need one username and one password to access our systems. But also we knew that we had to reduce the friction that we had for this authentication process. So we wanted to add single sign-on and social logins. So if you were logging into one of our services and then wanted to access another service, you didn't have to put your credentials twice, okay? And as part of our strategy, we knew that not everything that we wanted to do back then was gonna be and develop our applications, but that in some cases we would be hiring or acquiring new products, and the way to integrate with these products, the only way would be using standards. So we knew that we had to support OpenID Connect or SAML as standards, and that was something that we were not able to do back then. And of course, some of the services wanted to provide digitally need a really high level of availability. We are talking about at least a 99.9, and because we discovered that we were not able to support these services if we had more than 1 hour per month of downtime, okay? So next slide. So we decided to implement ISV, the cloud version, and you have just seen some of the screens of that tool and shown by Milan. And the first thing we did was to think where we wanted to go. Okay, so we defined the end of the journey for us. Okay, of our CIAM journey. We discovered, for example, Jose was telling us at the beginning that self-management was gonna be key. That if we wanted to support more than 2 million users, the only way was that all the flows related to the authentication and authorization processes, we are talking about flow, for example, for your forget your password flow, had to be self-managed, okay? And we wanted to have all these authentications go for our customers and health service providers going through ISV, okay? So everything had to pass through our only and centralized and authentication server, okay? We also defined that if there was a user that was a customer and also a health service provider, because lots of our health service providers are customers, we wanted them to have only one user, okay? So they would only need one username, one password, one identity with us to access the services. Then OSDE will have to know which relationship that user had with OSDE and will allow access to different systems depending on that relationship. Of course, as part of the as most companies today, as part of the digital transformation process, we knew that we will be building new mobile applications, and if we want to have a good and fast login on our mobile systems, we will have to leverage the capabilities of the mobile devices. We are talking about being able to log in with biometrics using the fingerprint readers or the Face ID capabilities of the devices, okay? But as we wanted to increase the security, we wanted to support different multi-factor authentication methods, not only for the login, but also to authorize some transactions. We had critical transactions that we wanted to add to our digital services, and for some of them, being able to have an assurance that the user that was authorizing that transaction was the real user was something that could give us a lot of value. As we were going on a journey that we were trying to use a service on the cloud, we wanted to reduce the risk of our password being leaked. Every company has been hit by different attacks where the reputation is compromised because the passwords of the users are leaked, and we decided to build everything in a way where all the passwords will be managed only by IBM, by the ISV product. So we wouldn't be handling this new password for our users in plain in OSDE infrastructure. So if we have a problem with our password being leaked, we would know that it's something that's going on our ISV. That will be the only place that's managing those passwords. We wanted to implement all these authentication flows on ISV to reduce the dependency with OSDE system. So everything related to the authentication, onboarding, or authorization processes should run on ISV. And we, of course, wanted to implement all the security best practices supported by ISV, because part of this journey is to try to iterative increment the security that we provide to our customers. So next slide, Andrea. I'm going to talk about some of the key challenges that we found on this journey. Not all the challenges, but some of them that I think that could be some of the challenges that you should also or may also conquer when you start your own journey into CIAM. One of them was user migration. Okay, so of course, from the business side, they wanted to migrate all the users that we had before, but we did a lot of analysis to see that if that was the best way to move forward. In some cases, we realized that it was better not to migrate because not all users provide good value if you're not sure of the quality of those users. So I recommend paying attention to what you are going to migrate and what not. Also, if you want to migrate users, you have to check the format you are using to storage your password hashes, because depending on that, it may not be possible to migrate those passwords to the cloud, okay, or to another product. Adoption was also a key challenge, and as we decided to use OpenID Connect, that's nowadays the de facto standard for authentication, and we thought that everyone would be able to adopt this very quickly, but we discovered that a lot of our dev teams didn't have experience in OpenID Connect. They didn't really know anything about it, have never used it, and it wasn't so easy for them to start adopting this tool. It took a lot of time for some of them to understand the standard. And also, to get the self-management that we were looking for, we realized that we would not only need to change some of our, let's call it, systems that provide services to our customers, but also some of the support systems that we have in our backends or our internal processes that we use to provide support to our end user. For example, if a customer calls to a call center, because he can't create his password, we need to have the system for our workforce to be able to understand what's going on. Okay. And another thing that gave us a lot to talk about and discuss internally was to define what to store on the cloud directory, because it wasn't only what value we will be given to that information, but also how we will be able to keep that information updated in real time. That may not be so easy. And if, for example, you want to have an authorization claim on top of Cloud Directory and you don't update that claim on real time, you may have inconsistencies between the authorization system in your business applications and what you have defined on Cloud Directory. And finally, we found lots of business cases that we wanted to support that needed new features that ISV didn't support back then. And with that, this product has been great, not only because of the product, but also because of the team that it's behind this product, that it's really open to feedback. So I've been working for 2 years with Jose, with Milan, with Vivek, that you have been able to hear today. And we have discussed lots of ideas. They have a system. I put the URL here. You can access there, and it's open. And you can create a request for enhancement for the product. So anyone is able today to request something, a new feature, for example, or a modification to an existing feature that may help them support your own business case. And this team is gonna take the time to analyze these requests. We have been really lucky. Lots of our requests have been implemented in these 2 years, and also they have given us some workarounds to use new features that the product had to solve our needs, and while the new feature that they were gonna develop was coming. Something important about this is that when you create your request for enhancement, you have to be sure that you add everything that you will be needing, because what may happen if not is that they will deliver the new feature, but you won't be able to use it because you forget to add something that it was really important to be able to take this into production. Okay, so you have to provide all the context and why you are needing this feature. No, it's really important. So next slide, please. So where we are now on this journey, we have more than 1.5 million users on the platform and 18 applications integrated to it, more than 2.2 million logins per month. Mainly the logins are made from customers. And we have a definition right now that all the new applications that we are launching, all the services are authenticating the users with ISV. Okay, so we are in a situation that we don't have that much problem with adoption, and everyone is starting to use it without much trouble. We are also trying to leverage new features, like, for example, the data privacy and consent feature. That was something that at the beginning we didn't think that was part of our CIAM experience, but then we found out that it was supported by the product and it really matched some of our needs. So we are trying to start using that feature, for example. Next slide. And finally, I'm gonna talk about some of the lessons we learned in this journey. Okay, so regarding the use of OpenID Connect, I don't know if I don't have time to enter much in detail of the protocol or the standard, but one of the flows, the most common and recommended, is authorization code flow. But there isn't so much written out how to open a federated login page on the mobile devices when you are using authorization code flow. So something we learned painfully was that it was best if you, on Android, you use custom tabs, and on iOS, you use an AES web authentication session to open your login web page. Because if you use another type of, for example, in a browser or something else, you will have a lot of trouble, because there are a lot of processes like the social login behind, where they use the user agent to try to measure the risk level of adaptive security for your session. And if you don't use this kind of an object in your mobile devices, you're gonna have big problems. Another thing is PKCE. PKCE is PKCE, Proof Key for Code Exchange. This is something that I believe should be mandatory. It's really easy to implement and at a really high level of security. So you should all be using this on all your applications. And We also discovered that sometimes using public clients may be worth the risk. From a security standpoint, it's really common that you want to protect your secrets and put secrets for your clients and manage those secrets on your backends. But if you do this, you won't be able to leverage some of the existing SDKs or libraries, for example, developed on JavaScript. And these libraries only works if you have a public client. They won't work if you are using your own backend and to integrate to OpenID Connect. And this could really help with adoption. If you are using Pixie, the risk of using public client may not be so great. You have to really analyze the situation, but it may be a good option. Also, we found out that lots of our dev teams didn't really understand how the refresh token flow work. And well, we discovered that we have to force them to test it. Okay, so what we have been doing with some success is that we set the access token lifetime for their applications to 1 or 2 minutes. So while they are doing their business testing or their functional testing for the applications, if the refresh token flow is not working, the application is gonna hang or get a deny access error. Okay, so I recommended that even though the teams tell you that they understand the refresh token flow, you be sure that they are testing it correctly. And regarding ISV, some of the lessons we learned is that you should only replicate information to the cloud directory. That's the main database that Milan was showing in one of his screens, where you put your users. You put information there only if there is no other way to solve your business case. Okay, and if you can and try to avoid putting information that you won't be using, because keeping that information updated is not so easy. You should also use at least 3 tenants for the different environments, because there are some of the configuration options that give the tool. For example, you have the ability to define your own themes, your own custom and interfaces for your web pages. But if you are not using different tenants, it's going to be difficult to test the new configurations. So we are using 5 tenants right now, and it's really helpful to have different environments for different situations. We are also sending our events from ISV to QRadar, and that's really helpful because maybe in some cases the built-in reports are not enough for us. So we are using QRadar to get more information about what's going on inside ISV. And finally, this product evolves constantly. So every month there are new features, and you should be assessing these new features and whenever you can, because even though the feature may be added to the product, if you don't change a configuration, you won't be able to take advantage of this feature. And this feature may be something that could provide a quick win for you and really easy to implement, but you have to take the time every month to see what's new and to see if you can take advantage of any of this. Okay. So, well, that's it for today. I'm gonna open the room for questions if you have, and you can write them on the chat and I will try to answer. And if not, well, thanks everyone for listening to me. Okay, I see that there are no questions, so.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Marcelo. It was a great presentation. Great having you here. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you speakers for being here as well. We will be sending the PowerPoint presentation and the link for the replay as well to you via email. There's a survey you can actually give your opinion on today's session, and there's a box also for you to include some interests or any comments you want to provide. Here at the left, you have a trial for IBM Security Verify. It's for free if you scan the code right now. And then if you have any questions that we haven't answered in the chat today, please, there's Felipe Peñaranda's email. I'm going to leave the slide a bit longer for you to write it and scan the code. Thank you very much for everyone coming. Thank you.